Hey now, we are getting over, and I am the Silver King, Adam Silverstein, here to lead you through these hard times. With your 2025 AEW Revolution Instant Analysis. That's right, Getting Over is back once again, and we are here just minutes after AEW Revolution went off the air to break down every single match on the card of All Elite Wrestling's first pay-per-view of 2025. There is a loaded schedule coming up. Dynasty, Double or Nothing, Y'all in Texas, which Vintage Chris Vanini may or may not go to later this year. But here's a fun thing to tell you right off the top. Vintage is here for this instant analysis. Did not announce that during the week. Certainly did not tease it at any point on our AEW Revolution Ultimate Preview, but he is here and you will hear from him momentarily. Before we get to Vintage, allow the Silver King to remind you that this show
is all about Defy.
So head over to Apple Podcasts and Spotify, leave a 5-star rating on Apple, take a little extra time, leave a 5-star written review. If you do, we will read it live right here on the show. Don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube at Getting Overcast, not only for full audio of every episode that we post, but video interview clips from our old interviews and full-length video interviews for everything that we do in 2025 and beyond. In fact, the Silver King spent an hour this week speaking with NXT play-by-play man Vic Joseph, and that interview is up on our YouTube page at Getting Overcast, so make sure you watch and listen to that. Please also remember to follow us on social media at Getting Overcast on Twitter, at Getting Over on Blue Sky for episode drops, news, analysis, highlights, all of that good stuff. You can also send in questions and comments for the show that we will read on air. And on nights like this, you get to vote in pre- and post-show polls surrounding pay-per-views like AEW Revolution. Again, every reason to follow us on social media at Getting Overcast on Twitter, at Getting Over on Blue Sky. Now, before I welcome Vintage into the program, because this is an instant analysis, we have to do the special thing that we do, and that is crack open a cold one. And since I got so many incredible responses last week to my pocket sandwich, the peanut butter and jelly goes by Royal Palm Brewing down here in South Florida, I had a 4-pack, so I decided to open another one. Got a variety of beer. We have some big stuff planned for WrestleMania and other major shows coming up for WWE and AEW, but I wanted another pocket sandwich. Sue me. Vintage, what do you got over there?
I got a Spotted Cow from New Glarus, from up in Wisconsin, but we got some friends who are frequently up there and bring some by. So I've had this one on the pod before, but good to be here on the show for a late run-in. Yeah,
it looks like we're both doing a familiar beer on this particular evening. What kind of beer is that, by the way?
Let me see here. I'm not really familiar with kinds of beer.
No, so sure. I didn't know if it was like an IPA or dark beer.
Pilsner.
Oh, okay.
I guess.
Sure. Makes sense. As long as it tastes good.
That's what that is.
Sure. As long as it tastes good.
I just drink whatever. I don't know.
No, that's fine. What's interesting is you actually live in an area where there's a number of very good breweries, and I actually happen to like Shiner, which is in Texas. I don't think it's in your specific area. I don't think it's a Dallas or Arlington-based brewery, but it is famous in Texas, and we get a lot of that beer down here in South Florida. So I'm very well versed in Shiner. They make a s'mores beer, which I have not had in a couple of years, but it comes out, I want to say around Halloween maybe or something like that, but it is freaking fantastic. If you can find Shiner s'mores, make sure you go and get that. But we're not here to talk about beer. We're here to talk about All Elite Wrestling and specifically Revolution. We're going to break down this entire card instant analysis style. What does that mean? It means we're going to discuss every single match, what happened in the match, our analysis of that, some predictions perhaps going forward. We'll give you a match grade. We'll go all the way through the card, and at the end, we'll give you a final grade for AEW Revolution. We'll also remind you what our pre-show expectation grades were for the show, and I got Chris's before the broadcast began, so his is unencumbered by any bias from having watched the actual show. In terms of this instant analysis, given the number of matches, the work rate nature of AEW, the length of the pay-per-views, we're going to do some shorter move breakdowns when possible. Instead, focus more on highlights so as to keep the show manageable. It's a Sunday night after all. The only two production notes I had off the top were first, AEW featured the largest commentary tables I have ever seen in professional wrestling. It made me expect something crazy during the show was going to happen. Given their size and prominence, I thought someone was going to get thrown through the bottom of them or something. That never happened. Second, though, I wanted to shout out AEW's production because it's been a struggle for this company for about 5 years. There were multiple high-quality camera shots that were clearly planned, but appropriately so. The ones that stood out to me was the start of the Will Ospreay-Kyle Fletcher match and the end of the Toni Storm-Mariah May match. Huge step up from their normal production. They met the moment in terms of the quality of the show that AEW Revolution was, and also the venue, the Crypto.com Arena, formerly known as Staples Center. This is one of the best venues that AEW has ever run, and the show looked like it was a major league show, which perhaps could not always be said about AEW, whether it's Dynamite or whether it's pay-per-views.
I completely agree. I literally wrote that down in my notes. I thought this is some of the best production AEW has ever done. It's something I've often criticized them for. Either they miss camera shots or something doesn't work. And nobody's perfect. You don't get everything. But I thought top to bottom, really, really well done. It felt as good as it's ever been. I really liked their camera work outside the ring.
Yeah, agreed.
I don't know if it was I don't know if the frame rate was lower or what, but just the way they shot it made it look really cool. Like when Hangman's trying to get back into the ring, the camera like stays with him. I thought they did a really, really good job.
Yeah, it was like so impressive that it was notable. And it's also like, this is what we come to expect from WWE, right? So when you watch WWE and then you see AEW, you're like, oh, it's just not really up to par. But this was pretty up to par. I mean, it was pretty damn close.
Yep.
So credit to the AEW production team for that. We don't really shout them out. They deserved it here, but that's not really what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about every single match on this show. Let's start with the main event. The AEW Championship on the line, Jon Moxley defending against Adam Copeland. On Collision, Copeland cut a promo calling Mox a false martyr, not a messiah, which is obviously ironic. He believed Wheeler Yuta had seen the light and said he needs to fight the Moxley who set the industry on fire when he signed with AEW. Cope said it might be his last time challenging for a main title, and he has to do it. He has to win it. Good stuff as usual from Copeland on the mic, always nails. Getting away from the whole soul of AEW shit that's been necessary for this storyline. Mox later responded that they were the last of a dying breed, and it's crazy how there's like a dozen people who fit that category in AEW. They're all the last of the dying breed. Mox said he wants to respect Copeland, but since he didn't show his people mercy, he cannot respect him. I don't know why Copeland would have shown the Death Riders mercy when they've been pieces of shit for the last like 6 months, but I digress. By the way, any go-home moments from Collision, which aired on Saturday, 24 hours before Revolution, we will be mentioning as part of this breakdown. So this match main evented, fans sang Copeland's music again. Mox came out hugging the briefcase wearing army green. The guys went strong style from the start, exchanging blows. It was really slow and plodding. Fans in the crowd even got distracted. They were shown the ops in a suite during the match because I guess they're going to challenge for the trios title soon. Very random. Copeland hit Impaler DDT. He later moved into a crossface. He speared Mox through the ropes outside. Mox grabbed the camera, promising to break Cope's neck before exposing the concrete. He got hit by a reversed backdrop from Cope, and then Mox came back and stomped him into the hard surface. Pile driver back inside the ring. Copeland got a rope break on a submission. When Mox got in the referee's face, the referee, who was Bryce Remsburg for this match, he stood up to Mox more than most wrestlers in the locker room have over the last 6 months. Mox brought in a chair, creating a distraction in which Copeland speared the referee out of the ring. Then he took like 1/5 of a botched Death Rider. Mox tried Concerto, but he measured it 3 different times in another really weird spot. That allowed Copeland to basically donkey kick the chair back into his head. Wheeler Yuta came down, hitting Bazaiku knee on Copeland. Jay White appropriately saved. He tried using the briefcase. He accidentally drilled Copeland in the face before brawling off with Yuta. That was a 2.9 false finish. That probably was an 8-second count. Copeland speared Moxley for a false finish. Copeland then speared him twice more, only for Christian Cage to pull the referee out of the ring. He pulled out the contract, hit Copeland in the head with the metal encasing of it, signed the contract, and then speared Copeland for a false finish. Then he hit Kill Switch with Mox breaking the fall using a bulldog choke. Cage put a hand on Cope's chest, trying to get the fall, which was actually kind of genius. But Cage then passed out inches away from touching him a second time as Mox retained the title and ran away from this whole situation with the briefcase. There was a final segment to the show. We will talk about that a little later in this instant analysis. And I'm going to tell you what right off the top. I'm not going to do what you all think I'm going to do.
Don't worry. Don't worry. I'm not going to do what everyone thinks I'm going to do. Flip out, man.
Because look, while getting the title off Mox was of primary importance, to be completely fair, this was actually one of like the better retentions of his title from a booking standpoint. Copeland was protected in the loss. His best friend again cost him. That continued their epic rivalry in a sensible fashion, even though we really don't need to continue edging Christian in AEW in 2025. Cage lost the contract, though. It never made sense for him to hold it in the first place because being AEW champion should not have been a consideration for him. What I particularly liked, though, was Christian's attempts to pin Copeland while he was getting choked out. That was a great touch. Those are the positives. The match itself was poor. The Yuta spot was supposed to be some big moment, but it was a total eye roll because no one thought Yuta was actually going to help Copeland. And by the way, no one gives a shit about Yuta. White leveling Cope, it should result in something, but with Cage getting involved, I wonder whether that just gets brushed over as like a means to separate them logically on TV. In the end, this was basically the inverse of what fans wanted, and perhaps worst of all, and I've said this many, many times, it's that it was just like every single Death Riders segment. Flashes of quality and interest, and then an ending that leaves the crowd silent and dejected. In this case, it was even worse because of a lame finish to end an entire pay-per-view. So I actually forgot to even write down a grade as we were preparing for the show. I'd say like, I don't know, man, 3 stars, B-. That's where I'm at for Mox and Cope.
So like the context of the show matters for this match because we had seen 2 complete gory hardcore matches and several other really good matches, all culminating in this, which was always going to be the worst wrestled match on the card.
Correct.
Because of who's in the show.
And we all knew it coming into the show, by the way. Every single person who watched this pay-per-view knew this would be either the worst match or a bottom 2 or 3 match on the whole card.
And that's not necessarily that it's bad. It's just this is an AEW card and you saw everything else that was on the card. And you did a good job on the Ultimate Preview laying out kind of all the scenarios that could happen here.
Thank you.
And they kind of all almost came into play. But ultimately, it was like the worst possible ending of all of them. Like, you got the cash in, you got Jay White, and all of it just led to Mox retaining anyway.
Right.
And it was like, I had wondered, like, you know, there was talk, should Tony Storm or Mariah May main event the show? We'll get to that. But when this is going on, I'm like, it's got to end in some crazy ending. That's why you would end this with this. And then we start to get it. And then we end where we started. I saw somebody on Twitter, I forgot who it was, said it felt like a 2019 WWE ending to a show. And that's kind of how I felt too. Because like there were a lot of possibilities, a lot of fun possibilities. And instead, none of it mattered. Like, why even have Christian cash in if this is the result? You know, like it made the whole thing feel like a waste of time. I did think when Mox had Christian in the chokehold and Christian puts his hand on Edge and almost gets the pin, that was awesome. That would have been an amazing, like, funny way to end the show. I thought that was such a creative thing.
Oh, the pop that people would have expressed for that, the shock if that happened. Yeah.
That'd almost be more of a babyface way to win, but still, it was really inventive. And I was like, oh man, that would have been really cool. So ultimately, the worst possible ending out of all of them. And I will note something I always have to criticize because it always happens. The loser passed out, didn't tap out.
I know. Yeah.
It happens all the time in WWE and in AEW.
And I criticize it every single time.
Especially when it's Christian who's a heel.
Yeah.
Just have him tap. Why does Christian need to tap? Why does Christian need to pass out?
If it was the inverse, if it was Copeland, then I'm okay with him passing out. It's Christian. He can tap out. It's okay.
And he's a heel.
He's a heel. That's what I'm saying.
That's the point.
Yeah.
So
it was just like I said, it was a lame finish to what in many ways was an excellent pay-per-view. That was, I mean, spoiler alert, we always talk when it comes to AEW at the end, was it worth the $50? Many times recently it has not been close to worth the $50. This one was, as far as I'm concerned.
Great show.
But
Great show.
to end it on this kind of sour note, when there were other matches that made sense as main events, immensely, immensely disappointing. And look, why don't we go and talk now about what I believe should have main evented this show. I don't even think it was the best match on the card, but it should have been the main event. And then we'll go through the rest of the card. Women's Championship was on the line. Toni Storm defending against Mariah May in the Hollywood ending. That basically meant it was Falls Count Anywhere, no holds barred. This was basically the mid-show main event. The best storyline in AEW right now did not get top 3 billing on this pay-per-view. But there was a fantastic video package that preceded this match. May dressed like a bride, Storm like Betty Davis. Mariah pulled out a taser, Luther stopped her, and then got drop-kicked into a table of plastic champagne glasses, and the taser never came back into play. Toni did a seated powerbomb off the stage through a table. This was 2 minutes into the match for a false finish. May did Storm Zero into the steel steps, no cover. Toni bladed 5 minutes in. Then she took a hip attack into a chair. Both simultaneously grabbed tape and champagne buckets that were full of broken glass. The idea being to invert the tape so it's sticky and then dip their hands in it to get glass on and then punch each other. Well, unfortunately, Mariah barely got the tape on her hand. Neither of them got much glass on the tape. And the whole spot was really clunky and unnecessary. Mariah bladed, then shattered a champagne bottle between Toni's legs and bit her wound. Then she hit Mayday into glass for a false finish. The champion immediately hit Storm Zero into a chair and glass for a false finish. Despite all of this, Mariah ran away when Toni found the shoe. Storm did a stomp of May into her title, then beat May with the strap. She raised the shoe but didn't capitalize. That allowed Mariah to hit Mayday on the stage for a 2.9. Toni ultimately beat Mariah with the shoe and then did Storm Zero into a table that was set up there from the very beginning to retain the title in 13 minutes. She collapsed on top of Mariah, almost half hugging her, with both bloody as lights shone on them, and the big screen said, "The end," which I thought was a fantastic touch, as it was like the final scene in a tragic film. The two forced Queen of the Ring mentions from commentary were really off-putting, though that was just a minor detraction at the end of the match. For a while, Chris, during this, I was legitimately not sure whether I loved it or hated it. It was undoubtedly extreme. The only part I truly disliked was the tape and glass spot, which was convoluted and forced and totally unrealistic that they'd have the same idea at the same time and that it wouldn't work for either of them. Many of the kickouts were ridiculous. The rest of it was really strong, and the finish was actually the best part of the match by a mile. Factoring in the shoe, having Storm and May almost embracing when it was over, it was actually a reversal of the initial betrayal, with Storm beating down May with the shoe the way Mariah initially took out Toni. It was the bloodiest women's match that I can remember. The bottle to the crotch spot, it played into some of the vulgarities they expressed during the build. So I saw some people thought it was distasteful. I actually thought when you're talking about like ripping up someone's labia or vagina or whatever they said, I forget all the crudeness that they said. Okay, they tried. Like you have to kind of deliver on that, right? At R_J_B_3 asked if you can still have liked this match, but expect more from a storytelling perspective, given the length of the feud. And I believe that's exactly where I fall. They did tell story in this match successfully, but for a Hollywood ending rubber match, for the best women's feud in AEW history, I wanted more than 13 minutes and I wanted a lot more drama. The violence was almost used as a crutch to not tell a good wrestling story. I said it on the Ultimate Preview. I believe it fully now after the show. This should have been given 5 to 10 more minutes, and it should have main evented this card as a lights out match. No doubt about it. I've legitimately already seen people calling this the best American women's match ever and the women's match of the year. Those are hilarious exaggerations, but it was violent and it was an absolute barn burner. No doubt about that. It's an A match, 4.25 stars. It didn't get the high A for the reasons I mentioned. There's no extra credit for me just because someone blades or does a Crimson Mask. They need to be used as storytelling devices for them to actually matter to me. But was this fantastic? Yes. Should it have main evented the show? Absolutely. But was it the greatest American women's match ever or the women's match of the year? No, it wasn't.
It was a fantastic match that should have main evented the show. It was the best story coming in. It was the best women's storyline anywhere in years, like quite a while.
Yeah.
Like really, really great stuff. My biggest criticism is, like you said, it needed to be longer. And I don't think it was longer because of where it was on the show. It is like the violence to minute ratio was too high. So if you just add
correct, exactly
5 minutes without any extra violence
of some actual wrestling, maybe just a little bit,
then you can kind of get those story beats. It felt like they knew they didn't have a ton of time. And so they just kind of had to go all out from the beginning.
That's such a great shout. They put 20 minutes of violence into a 13-minute match. That's exactly correct.
That's what it felt like. It just felt like it was kind of going very fast. It was like, let us like breathe on this for a second. And so like at the very beginning, Mariah whips out. First of all, Mariah running to Toni Storm to start the match at the top of the ramp. Fantastic. It's exactly how you should start that. Also, this goes back to what and I think you always say too, which is the best no DQ matches are falls count anywhere. And this is why, because the drama never stops. It's never, oh, we got to wait for them to get back to the ring to do something. Oh, we got to wait for the 10 count or the I quit or this. It can end at any time. That's why falls count anywhere is so good. We need to see more of that.
Absolutely.
But Mariah.
Well, hold on. Let me actually put a pin in that real quick.
Yep.
It is the best. I completely agree with everything you said. I don't know that we need to see more of it, but it needs to be utilized rather than last man standing and other similar situations. But we don't need, I don't want it spammed. We don't need a spamming of falls count anywhere matches.
So Mariah whips out the taser and then she kicks Luther over the table and she like slips as she's doing this. And it sure looked like she hit her head when she landed, which is pretty unfortunate way to start, but she seemed to be okay. And then when Tony kind of power bombs her off the stage through the table, there was not a lot of like protection there. Like it was just one table and that was it. So glad everybody did that okay as well. I wrote down in my notes that Tony's bleeding quickly, and that's before we knew that it was going to be as short of a match as it was. Now we know they had to get to it. I didn't love the tape your hands glass spot. It did feel a little weird and all that, but the finish was fantastic. They kick out of some big moves. The shoe brings kind of it all back together. And the pile driver, the Storm Zero through the table was awesome. Fantastic. These two put on a show. I said from the moment I saw Mariah May, even before AEW, I was like, she looks like a star. And the two of them elevated each other in such a big way throughout all of this. It was fantastic. They deserve all their flowers, all their praise. And on a job well done, just wish they had gotten some more time.
Yeah, I know you don't grade matches like I do. I'm just curious what you thought of my grade or what your grade would be for this.
I'd probably do 4.25 as well because I thought the blood was a bit gratuitous. It was too much for me that it kind of took it down a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to give a match 5 stars, and we have many times on this show, 5 stars and 5 stars plus, it can't be. You can have a 13-minute 5-star match, but it can't be a 13-minute match like that, where there's very little wrestling and blood. You're kind of relying on bloodletting to tell most of your story, just that it's violent and they hate each other. We knew that coming in. Like I wanted, they had so much material to draw on and the 2 prior matches to draw on and other, fighting segments, brawling segments together. That's why I loved the finish so much, because it was a perfect retelling of what happened previously, but you didn't really get that throughout the rest of the match. And it was, I don't know. It just frustrated me. I know that they could have done that even better if they got the position they deserved in the main event, got more time, and were able to actually tell a story and have a match rather than just have a violent conclusion, which is really what it felt like. Let's move.
I will add, this was my favorite match of the whole show.
Oh, it was your favorite match of the entire show. Do you think it was the best match of the show or just your favorite match of the show? Because there is a difference in those.
I mean, it depends on what people like. Like work rate to me is not like my most important thing.
Okay.
I thought just the entire presentation, the stakes, the emotion I felt, this was the top.
Fair enough. Will Ospreay fought Kyle Fletcher inside a steel cage on Collision. We saw a taped Ospreay promo recounting United Empire history. Then he got almost unintelligible, getting angry at Fletcher before repeating that he's on another level. I love the passion and energy as always from Will. Just the content that can be better. Fletcher later kind of retorted, selling that he's sadistic and saying Ospreay will only be remembered as his own greatest rival once he beats him. Fletcher is a hell of a promo. I am immensely impressed by his mic work. And when you combine that with his ability, man, the arrow points up for this guy. Let's get to the match. Ospreay got a prelude entrance to his actual entrance that was like kind of cool, but also seemed a bit confusing to many of the people who were watching it. I think many people were worried that he lost his actual entrance music. Both guys climbed the cage to stand atop a corner before the bell, which was an epic view prior to the match, and it helped allow you to feel like the gravity of the rivalry. It was this moment and the end for Storm and May that were some of those production points that really stood out to me. Ospreay bladed just like Storm 2 minutes into the match, so Fletcher licked his blood off the cage. What is with this company and eating other people's blood? His blood gushed from his head as usual. Ospreay did a great turnaround, phenomenal forearm, then a trap super kick into an exposed turnbuckle and a Cancun tornado. Fletcher bladed, but this was reasonable because his head actually hit exposed metal. Fletcher again licked Ospreay's blood for no reason. That's twice. So Ospreay licked Fletcher's blood 3 times. Then they exchanged head-holding kicks, which was ridiculous. Fantastic counter sequence into a spike DDT by Will. Brainbuster by Kyle. Mark Davis came out with bolt cutters to open the cage. He threw a bag of weapons in, which didn't necessarily benefit Fletcher. It was just for, it was like the pennies for all dish they talk about in Office Space. You know, it was weapons for all. Again, odd. Got booted into the cage door, knocked outside. Barbed wire bat shots into Fletcher's body. Then Ospreay ran the barbed wire through his head before doing a Cactus Jack bang bang homage in the corner. Fletcher feigned begging for mercy, putting on a United Empire armband before hitting a low blow. Then he wiped his blood with the armband and stuck it in Ospreay's mouth. 4. Missed a bat shot, then 8 hidden blade plus Stormbreaker for a broken fall by Davis, who himself bladed. Ospreay hit Fletcher with a poison rana and did hidden blade on Davis into a chair. Now the referee decides to chain the door back after not doing it, even though Davis had already interfered. Ospreay hit Ozcutter from like 5/6 of the way up the cage for a false finish. Fletcher tried to escape, but was actually grabbing a screwdriver. He dug that into Ospreay's head. And yes, he licked it. 5. Styles Clash got countered into a brainbuster. Fletcher then did a second one into a steel chair for a false finish. Ospreay then hit Styles Clash into thumbtacks that Fletcher had spilled out for a false finish. A Styles Clash into thumbtacks. Ospreay grabbed the screwdriver and stopped Fletcher from climbing out. They banged heads like rams before Ospreay stabbed Fletcher. Did not lick the screwdriver this time. Did a Spanish fly from the top of the cage, but Will did not land flat. He landed on his side, his shoulder, and his hip. Fletcher yelled that he fucking hated Ospreay. He cursed some more, so Will delivered Hidden Blade and Tiger Driver to get the win. Ospreay really looked like he screwed up his hip on that Spanish fly for whatever it's worth. He was selling it, coming out, and I think he's injured, but we'll see what happened. You'll remember I was concerned coming into this match that they would do something stupid from the top of the cage. Hopefully he's mostly okay. Anyway,
he wait, real quick on that. Ospreay landed on his side.
Yeah.
He didn't land flat. I worried he busted his shoulder.
I thought he separated his shoulder or broke his collarbone. That's what I thought.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
Yeah, just fingers crossed he's okay. This was an epic cage match. There's no doubt about that. The tough part of booking a match like this is that neither of these guys now should ever lose to a regular finisher. Some of these moves were straight insanity, and the match easily could have ended after that Styles Clash. Just for one example, I actually thought the Oz Cutter off the top wall of the cage was the move of the entire match. The Styles Clash second, the Spanish Fly third, or maybe even fourth. Some odd storytelling here. Ospreay has a deep red crimson mask, and he's getting all of the offense early. The idea of blading like that is to be on the defensive and fight from under, yet he was the one dominating the clean-faced guy. Also, it would have been more logical for the screwdriver to come from the side where Fletcher was standing. Otherwise, how was it planted there exactly? The Davis of it all was weak, And sure, it was necessary to introduce the weapons. I just felt like if they reduced the bullshit of this match, all of that, the licking of the blood, and they just focused on the wrestling, this could have been an all-time cage match. And let me be clear, I watched ECW back in the day. I've seen Japanese death matches. The blood and even digging into wounds and shit, it always happened for a reason. Just feasting on blood to feast on blood is disgusting. And it adds nothing, especially doing it 5 times in one match. It was not as over the top as like Hangman Page and Swerve Strickland where they drank the other's blood, but it was still over the top. The work here was incredible though. Both guys. Ospreay, we know he's amazing. Fletcher is not as great of a wrestler, but he's an even better promo, and his heel work throughout this whole match was tremendous. This was the match of the night once it was all said and done from a wrestling perspective. Despite my multiple issues, I have this at an A+. I'm at 4.75 stars. I'm going to 100% watch this again before Thursday's show. I might even bump it up. I could potentially bump it down a little bit. I have to make sure it was more than just the epic spots that I appreciated. But either way, this was a spectacle, and both these guys deserve a lot of credit for risking their health to entertain us, because holy shit, was this a match.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, it feels like when you're a kid and you get ice cream for dinner, and then it's like, but you can't always have ice cream for dinner. You have to like have other stuff to appreciate it. And it's one of those where it's like, they do so much stuff every time. It's like, like, what does anything mean anymore? And again, this is where the whole context and the booking of the show as a whole matters, because this match came 2 matches after Tony Mariah. So we immediately went right back to 2 people bleeding like crazy, and it doesn't hit as much when we just saw it in a match that had a great story previously. So I'm like, this is a lot of blood over like an hour's worth of time. You even have a third guy come in and he's bleeding within like 5 minutes.
Yeah, he took a drop kick into a cage and boom, full crimson mask coming back.
Like, come on, man. Like, this is where it's like, you have to save it for the big moments.
Yeah, I think 5 people bladed on the show, by the way. Sorry.
That way it's impactful. We said, well, why didn't Kevin Owens bleed when he goes face first into barbed wire against Sami Zayn?
Should have.
Well, it's because Cody Rhodes was going to bleed at the end of the show. And whether or not you agree with it, it made Cody's bleeding feel that much bigger.
Can I give you a point
Yeah.
of order that you and I did not know last week, and I just found out like Friday?
Sure.
It looked like someone zoomed in during that match. It looked like Kevin Owens dropped a blade, so I think he was supposed to.
Oh, okay. Well,
but point is, he took a header into barbed wire. Like,
yes,
there was a reason for him to blade in that moment, right?
Yes.
It wasn't the start of the match 2 minutes in. It was the end of the match with like 5 minutes left to go. He would have bladed because he hit barbed wire directly into his head.
Yeah. There was also there was a point in this match, I forget who it was on commentary, but there was a comment about weapons or something being thrown in the ring, and someone on commentary goes like, what do you need all that for? You're already in a steel cage. The cage itself is a weapon.
He's right.
I was like, yeah,
exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the whole point.
Right.
Thank you for saying it.
Yeah.
And then I'm getting my criticism out of the way first.
Sure.
And then when they did the Spanish Fly, commentary basically didn't say anything.
Yeah, they no-sold it. Yeah.
Excalibur starts talking in like a hushed tone, and he's like, well, you knew these guys were going to do something crazy. It's like, dude, sell the moment.
Well, I think,
sell it as this crazy thing you can't believe.
I think his idea was like, because he's like, oh, well, the whole crowd held its breath. He was trying to make it sound like everyone was scared for their lives. And that's why he laid out, and it was so dramatic. And, it might have worked if he was better at commentary. The problem is he just couldn't sell it. That was the issue.
It's like, the thing we remember most about Mankind being thrown off Hell in a Cell is what Jim Ross said.
Correct.
Like that. That's WWE doesn't do this nearly as much as well. The John Cena turn, I would have loved some more commentary.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But it's just I want to hear the emotion from the commentator. So that's all the criticism. The match itself, this was like just insane. Like unbelievable stuff from two guys who are really, really good. I agreed with you. I didn't want them to do something too crazy because I didn't want Ospreay to get hurt.
Mhm.
So I hope it's okay. But it's like every time I see an Ospreay match, it's like, how can he top it? And he doesn't always top it, but he's like going for a 10 out of 10, a 12 out of 10 every single time.
Yeah.
And he's incredible. And he should be and maybe will be by the summer face of the company type stuff.
Yeah.
But Kyle Fletcher, throughout all of this, has really made a name for himself. For someone like myself who didn't really know him, he is incredible as well. Great job.
Yeah, no question about that. I don't really have much else here, but there was an extremely strange moment after the match where actresses from the Queen of the Ring film were interviewed in the first row of the crowd. And right after these two guys just beat the ever-loving shit out of each other, she decides to basically say, oh, by the way, what I love about wrestling is that it's predetermined. Like, she thought it was a cute line that she probably has been saying on press junkets and stuff while promoting the film. Like, she came up with this one line, a reporter loved it, so now she repeats it 10 different times. This was the wrong audience to say that in front of. Now, she didn't get booed, luckily. I think people just weren't even paying attention to what she was saying. But it was the wrong time, the wrong place. And yes, we all know, of course, it's predetermined. But you don't say that immediately after two guys absolutely kill each other and splatter the entire ring with blood. So the whole Queen of the Ring placement in this show, the way they shoved it into every crevice they possibly could. Look, if they paid for the promotion, great. I feel like it was a situation where there were a lot of AEW wrestlers that were in the film, and it was probably more like a quid pro quo type of situation. But dude, I mean, they shoved it into every crevice they possibly could. They shoved it into the main event match. They did it here. They promoted it throughout. And for her to kind of say that in that moment to me, it just stood out as like a total eye roll.
Yeah. By the way, I want to see the movie. It looks great. I hope to see it.
Mm-hmm.
It would have been nice if they got the star of the movie in it as well. Who I forget her name, but she was on Arrow for a long time. I think she's really good. So I'm looking forward to seeing the movie and seeing all the wrestlers that are in it. But like, you want to have the director, sure, but the actresses, I don't know who they are. And all I know is that they're not the star.
Well, they keep promoting, the director. No one gives a shit about this guy. I mean, no offense to him, but yeah, it's Emily Bett Rickards is the star of the film, but also Walton Goggins is in the damn movie. Like, there's some names in this movie, and the other girl.
Give me some.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. You go ahead.
No, it's okay. I was going to say the other girl who was there next to the one who said that line. She's the female wrestler in Heels. So she was in the film also. So like, there's a couple people that are like pretty damn notable. I think Jim Cornette would never be on an AEW show, but I think Jim Cornette's in the film as well. So there's a lot of people that like they could have had there to promote it, and they chose like the least interesting ones. So yeah.
Just show us a couple of clips of the AEW wrestlers in the movie.
Exactly. Yes.
That will get the AEW fans to go watch it.
Exactly. No, you're totally right. Now, all of that said, I do need to remind you guys.
I happen to love the number 5.
And I hope you do as well, because for $5 a month and $50 for the entire year, you can become an official Getting Overhead. Just visit buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. Sign up. You're going to get bonus audio, the fastest 5 minutes in professional wrestling, instant reactions to every major TV show. Kind of just like this, but all shoved into 5 minutes, whether it's Raw, SmackDown, NXT, AEW, Dynamite. We give you all that, plus exclusive news analysis posts every week. You can get it at buymeacoffee.com/gettingover, and you can financially support the continuation of this show by becoming an official Getting Overhead. Let's continue with this AEW Revolution instant analysis. The international title was on the line. Konosuke Takeshita defending against Kenny Omega. On Collision, Don Callis asked how long Omega could last until his guts explode. He promised that Takeshita would end him for good. It was literally 30 seconds. Omega ended the show with a tape promo telling Take that Callis will throw him aside when he loses. Now, I'm sure Omega's tights here were a video game reference. I don't know which one, but I loved the style. He looked awesome. Callis twice interfered early. Omega ate a release belly to back suplex ringside. Fans then booed when he tipped over a table. This whole table obsession from wrestling fans is silly. You can have the best match in the world, and someone teases a table, and all they'll do is chant, "We want tables," for the rest of the match. Takeshita upturned the table and dropped Omega's midsection into the side. Omega hit a Snapdragon and caught Takeshita with a V-trigger powerbomb, V-trigger in succession. Takeshita answered with a Blue Thunderbomb and a haluva kick, but Omega took him off the top with a springboard sunset flip powerbomb. Ridiculous spot. He collapsed trying One-Winged Angel. Takeshita then failed to reverse it, only to successfully reverse a Tombstone Piledriver and a Cradle version in succession. Take added V-triggers for 2 and 1 counts. The latter sent the crowd into a frenzy, Omega's classic kickout. There was a great sequence of pumped knees before Omega landed Poison Rana and a huge V-trigger. Callis grabbed Takeshita's arm, trying to stop the finish. They countered One-Winged Angel into Raging Fire, into a 3 reverse pinning exchange. It ended with a crucifix, and Omega won the title. AEW, for the first time in a long time, let the title change breathe for a while. They even set off a ton of pyro, but Omega was laying on the canvas the entire time selling, which it really did sell the battle and the importance of the win for Omega, given what he's battled through just to get back. But it didn't deliver on the celebration and AEW's decision to extend the segment. So you kind of got to figure out which direction you're going to go. If you're going to do the pyro, but he's not going to be able to sell it in the ring, wait until he gets on the stage, then do the pyro, and you get the picture of it. It was just wasted pyro is what ended up happening. This was my match of the night when it ended, and I really felt like it took me on the exact journey necessary, with Kenny overcoming both Konosuke and Dawn, despite being faced with multiple spots of adversity. Omega's selling was top tier here. It made the entire match. He did the best selling the entire night. The finish was excellent, with Omega out wrestling Takeshita. It totally protected the former champion. It ensured Omega got a decisive victory, despite the fact that he needed to battle through all that damage to his abdomen. It also left open the possibility for a rematch between them at some point down the line. These guys need to do a 30 or 60-minute Iron Man match one day. They have special chemistry that previously we've really only seen Omega have with Kazuchika Okada, 4.5 stars and an A.
This was really, really good. They did that classic wrestling thing where somebody has a real life weak spot and just make the story of the match around that. Like when they would drop Daniel Bryan on his head, and I'd cringe every time. That's what this was. All the shots to the gut, all the talk about Kenny Omega has a ticking time bomb in himself, and you're just like, every time. That table spot was great. It was a great spot that was also very safely done. And those are the best kinds of things. And everything about this was really great. I'm not a huge Takeshita guy, but you're right. Him and Omega just like have it. Every time they wrestle, it's just such good stuff. And you were right about the dragging on of the finish. That of the post match, that made me think somebody was going to come out, because I'm just not used to seeing it in AEW.
Yeah.
So I'm glad they did it.
So you said that they have it. Just wanted to clarify that. Yeah, they if they tightened up that celebration aspect, just did the pyro when he was on stage, the whole thing plays. Because then you have commentary talking about, oh my God, is Omega okay? He won the title, but at what cost? And he gets up there and he raises it triumphantly, and the pyro goes off, and you have an incredible picture of Omega triumphant with all this stuff around him. Instead, you have all the pyro go off while he's rolling around on the canvas. And then he gets up to the stage and he's like, yay. And then he just walks off. And it was the exact opposite of the way they needed to execute that. But it's okay. Like I said, production was much better on the show, but that was a flaw. No question about it. We had Swerve Strickland against Ricochet, #1 contendership for the AEW title. This was third on the show. Ricochet embroidered Prince Nana's robe with his logo, and Swerve entered with a drummer backing him. Early, when Swerve was beating on Ricochet ringside, Nana tried to pull him off, only to get shoved, which created animosity between them. And Nana just left him ringside. It seemed like a massive overreaction, and I figured it was a swerve in the moment, no pun intended. Leslie Jones, formerly of SNL, she made a spectacle during this match, standing and screaming. Michael Cooper was also there. Cameras kept cutting to her. All right, let's get to the match. Great counter sequence with Swerve using his power after Ricochet hit a springboard Hurricanrana before an apron Poison Rana. Swerve hit an insane vertebreaker onto the announce table right in front of Ken Jeong and Paul Walter Hauser. Swerve stomp was a false finish. Swerve blocked a low blow, but took an eye poke into a brainbuster and a 630. That was also a false finish. Nana came back and then stole his robe off the ring post. Swerve threw Ricochet out of the ring into a tope suicida on Nana. So Ricochet takes the robe off of him and puts it on in the middle of the match. Then he caught Swerve on a tope suicida, hitting a Death Valley driver where it legitimately looked like Swerve broke his neck. Swerve then Ricochet hit Vertigo for a false finish. Nana stopped Ricochet from doing his running finisher by holding the robe. That led to consecutive false rollover finishes. Swerve then hit 2 house calls, but Ricochet kicked out of both of them. So Swerve hit the JML driver and got the win. Swerve and Nana hugged after the bell, and Swerve gave him back the robe. Nana going backstage, it was nonsensical. Initially it was, and then it became even more nonsensical when this was the finish of the match. Why did he get so upset where he'd leave this guy to fend for himself against the heel? The go-home moment for this was Swerve telling Nana, not I, but we are going to fight him, and I'm going to get your robe back. And then a little shove in the heat of the moment, and he's like, nah, F this guy. I've been supporting him for 2 years, but he shoved me a little bit, and I'm so angry over my robe that I'm just going to leave him in the lurch here. Didn't make any sense. The other part that bothered me was Ricochet in a serious number 1 contenders match, putting on the robe and effectively costing himself this huge opportunity. I hope that's part of his story where there's a promo and he's like, I tried to kind of get into the head of my opponent. I made such a huge mistake. I got to be smarter, whatever. If it's not, it's a mistake. The match itself, all that aside, it was outstanding. A few too many false finishes for my taste. 2 house calls should have ended this match. Ricochet is not like a multi-time AEW champion here, but this was a no doubt
banger
and the match of the night through the first 3 on the show. So there kept being matches that exceeded the prior match of the night as the show progressed. I went 4.5 stars and an A. And now that Omega and Takeshita got the same grade, I need to juxtapose them, but it does feel appropriate because they were different match styles. But honestly, coming out of this, what I cared most about was that Swerve didn't get hurt outside the ring because that was a brutal Death Valley driver into the floor. He is doing some of the best work of any wrestler in the world right now. This was another fantastic showcase for his ability, both as a worker and a storyteller. It was the right finish. It was a high quality match, and it deserves an A.
Yeah, obviously really good stuff. Starting from the beginning, the live drummer was like offbeat.
Yes.
For the whole entrance.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't quite get it, and so it's like kind of annoying. They get in the ring. The crowd starts chanting at Ricochet, "You are bald." And I don't think Excalibur could hear what they were saying because he goes, the fans are reminding Ricochet what he's done. It's like, that's not what they're doing. They're calling him bald.
Right.
Because it's a social media thing that they do. I was confused at the Nana stuff as well as it happened. I was like, why did he leave? And then suddenly come back. Okay, we got there, yada, yada. I did also write down Ricochet really kicks out of 2 house calls. Seemed like a bit much, but ultimately, right result, right winner. Everybody knows, like, I'm not a big Swerve guy. I don't think he quite has it yet. And so him going right back into the world title picture, potentially being the one to dethrone Moxley, not really my thing, but he's been champion before. We know he's really over. Makes sense. So, but overall, really good stuff. I'd give this like 4 stars.
Bad take on Swerve.
You have it. You couldn't get rid of it. You couldn't sell it if you wanted to. You are it.
He is it. So I mentioned that there was something after the Moxley main event that we also needed to discuss. So Nana confronted Mox as he was walking out, through the crowd, through the Vom area. And as they were kind of arguing and security kind of separated them, Swerve is all of a sudden perched on top of one of the barricades in the crowd, looking like Batman, by the way. He splashes him from out of the crowd and then knocks Mox down, all the security, and it's pretty much Swerve who you see close Revolution. And that was far, far better than it being another Mox on top finish to a pay-per-view. I presume that match is going to happen at Dynasty. It's going to be interesting to see whether AEW decides to flip the title then, or they still continue waiting for Darby Allin or someone else that they pencil in to beat Mox. But it does feel like the way momentum is headed that Swerve might beat Mox and take this title. But I did like the close just because it reminded me of Batman so much. He's perched at the top. He waits for the perfect opportunity, and he just flies out. You see the cape. If he was wearing Nana's robe, it would have been literal Batman. But it was, again, better than the alternative is pretty much what I want to say.
Yes, much better than ending with Mox. Like, at least they made sure and knew to send the fans home with something like they're cheering about. You know, like they've ended some pay-per-views. You can't keep ending these shows with the bad guy winning and everybody's just upset. Like, you got to give them something to cheer. So that was a adjustment that needed to be made.
Yeah, and they've done that like 3 or 4 shows in a row, and it's been the same thing over and over. I'm not going to play the missionary position sound drop. Don't worry. Let's move to Hangman Page against MJF. This opened the show. Hangman's music played, then MJF's played. Taz asked the purpose of doing that, and I had the exact same question. I think it was to tease Page's original theme. Anyway, MJF did a rope run crotch thrust early and twice yelled that it was his company. Okay. Hangman hit his ringside moonsault, which always gets nailed. He bats 1,000 on that move. MJF hit a cradle DDT. Page delivered Deadeye, avoided Heatseeker, hit a buckshot lariat for a rope break. MJF countered a third attempt into Salt to the Earth, leading Page to sell his arm through the rest of the match. Then MJF grabbed a headset to say, "I'm the fucking man." By the way, they cursed like, I want to say 8 to 10 times on this show. It was like Cody Rhodes drops one F-bomb and AEW's like, "Don't forget, we curse all the time here. We have to remind you of that." That's what it felt like, right?
That is exactly what I thought. Because
Okay.
I was like, he's saying this this isn't like they're just talking to each other in the ring and dropping it. This is MJF on commentary dropping an F-bomb. And all I could think was his best friend Cody Rhodes did it, so maybe he feels like he has to do it.
But it, like, generally on an AEW pay-per-view, you'll hear like 2 F-bombs maybe equivalent. Like, just you'll hear other, words just because people are yelling at each other, and MJF always does it in his matches. But there were legitimately 4 different people on this show who dropped F-bombs. And it was almost like, oh, WWE did it once, so we have to remind you that we're more adult than them. So we have to do it 4 times now. Like, that's just the way it came across to me. Maybe I'm crazy. Hangman did a moonsault off the barricade into a tombstone counter that MJF landed onto an opened steel chair. The replay showed Hangman's head straight folding on the chair under Max's knees, but he broke the 10 count. Luckily, he was fine. MJF yelled, "Why you and not me? What's so special about you?" Hangman caught Heatseeker stepping through the ropes and hit Deadeye. It didn't really come close to landing, but he added Angel's Wings. Unfortunately for that, MJF's face hit the canvas first. It was a nasty landing. And then Hangman hit Buckshot Lariat and got the win. The storytelling here was almost like beat you over the head WWE style, with Max screaming at 2 different points, but it was well wrestled and we got the right result. The bigger issue was those 2 gnarly spots where each guy nearly got seriously injured. The ending sequence with Hangman stepping through the ropes and using Christopher Daniels' finisher, that was extremely smart, and it kept within the storyline. Page obviously had to win given his loss in the Swerve feud. Other than commentary screaming, "What a match," and telling us we had to love what we saw like 6 different times, it was a great opener. 4 stars A-. Might be a little bit quarter shy here, but my stream cut off like 6 different times while I was watching, and I missed parts of it. I'm pretty sure I was at 4 stars. I believe this makes it 1-1 in the series, so a rubber match will likely come once one of them is champion. They can definitely do a lot together if given extended time. You could see like the buddings of an incredible match. It just never really got to it for me.
Yeah, by the way, you're not the only one whose stream cut out a few times early on. I think that was everybody kind of had some problems.
Everyone who had Triller apparently had a problem with it. Yeah.
Yep. That's what me and my brother and I were using.
Mm-hmm.
Good stuff. I don't like Hangman's new entrance theme. Like, I just kind of love the original one he had for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
The pile, the tombstone on the chair, like, man, that was rough. And even I think commentary had said, like, normally the chair breaks,
right
when that happens.
Right.
That's the point. So, like, I was like, yeah, like, was this not a worked chair, or did they think it was going to break? It didn't. And just like, oof. Glad he was okay. glad / hope MJF is okay with the Angels wings as well. But ultimately, yes, it does feel like getting to a rubber match between these guys was the way it always had to go. And I'm looking forward to it. It's really good stuff. It just feels like everything about these two guys is like they're rushing to the end of the story and not telling us the story beats. You said this in the preview too, when MJF brought out the lighter fluid. It's like, dude, we're not there yet.
Right.
Like,
right.
You gotta like build this up over time and not just immediately going to like 10. So
yeah,
it just feel like
burning someone alive is, I mean, that's a 2-year-long feud ender, if you're going to try to do that.
Yeah. So, it feels like they're just like, instead of taking us on the journey, they're just like trying to like tell us the end of it.
Yeah.
But it was a good opener. It seems like typically MJF, when he's not the main event, he's the open, and seems to be working. It is weird that we're this far into the show before talking about this, because it does feel like MJF Hangman like should be a bigger thing than it is. And it's big and it's been good. It just feels like it's not as like legacy defining as it.
Well, yeah. I mean, look, Hangman has lost a shitload of matches and feuds recently. MJF was gone for a long time, and then he came back and they thrust him back in the Adam Cole feud, and that didn't do him any favors. And then he was working with Jeff Jarrett. So that's where they are now. I mean, look, Adam Cole, who main evented All In 2 years ago, he was on the pre-show. I mean, you got to like consider that. And you want to talk about Hangman and MJF being late on the show. There's another wrestler we're going to talk about even later, which is wild. It's not this next one, though, because let's get to her. TBS Championship, Mercedes Moné against Momo Watanabe. On Collision, Momo beat Serena Deeb in 11 minutes. Really nice match without any setup. Moné watched on commentary, then confronted afterwards. She shoved the title in Momo's face and took a kick, plus Meteora coming back. There was zero effort put into building this, and commentary made a great point on Revolution, which I say all the time. They're like, yeah, Momo's coming into this exhausted, having wrestled 24 hours earlier, a barn burner with Serena Deeb. Yeah, that's a great point. Why did someone challenging for a title wrestle 24 hours earlier in a match that they did not need to wrestle? Who decided that? Mercedes didn't. If Mercedes had forced her to have that match, then okay, that would make sense. But Mercedes didn't make her do it. It was just booked, and Momo was okay with it. Made no sense. They do it all the time in AEW. This was second on the card. Mercedes powerbomb Momo off the apron outside. Momo went on a really nice run. She got a crossface chicken wing locked in that I will always pop for a crossface chicken wing. There were consecutive falls that were 3.1s, unfortunately. Moné took a Meteora on the apron, only to lock in Statement Maker, countered into a chicken wing. Mercedes then hit a powerbomb, but Momo answered with an avalanche Uranagi, and I believe her finisher for a 2.9. Ultimately, Moné hit a crossbody, Moné Maker, Statement Maker, and got the submission victory and title retention, an actual tap out. Thank the Lord. This was an excellent match, man. Great work both ways. Another notch in Mercedes' belt. During this exceptional title run, she has had one high-quality match after another high-quality match. She deserves a lot of credit for her wrestling. I wish I had more actual analysis for you here, but it was just a match shoved into a show where we knew Moné was retaining. I guess most notable was that it was pretty even wrestling, though attempts to sell Momo's candidacy as like someone who could actually win the title in this moment, those never hit. 4 stars, A-. Really, really good.
Really good match. I don't know who Momo Watanabe is. I don't really know the story to it.
There wasn't one.
But the match was good.
Yeah.
And that's all I can say.
The story was she won a contract to challenge for any title in AEW, Stardom, or I think CMLL, and she chose this one. That was the whole story.
I'm just not from. I know of them, but I don't know what's going on in Stardom or CML. So to me, it's just a new person.
Of course. Continental Championship. This is the person that we are talking about crazy late in a show. Kazuchika Okada, one of the greatest wrestlers in Japanese history, against Brody King, 4th on the show. This was a TV match. Brody did a running crossbody into a seated Okada by the barricade. Okada hit a flying elbow. King countered Rainmaker into a corner Death Valley driver and cannonball. Okada did a shotgun dropkick into the barricade and grabbed a chair as a distraction so he could use the title for a false finish. It's crazy how belt shots never mean anything in AEW. King reversed Rainmaker. Okada countered a cannonball with his dropkick and won with Rainmaker. Expected winner, solid match. Brody got some run. Kazu got the shit kicked out of him. 3.5 stars and a B.
The first note I wrote on this match: King kicks out of a belt shot.
There you go.
That jumped out to me as well. Yeah, good stuff. Not a ton. Okada, continues to be fantastic. I love his entrance theme all the time. It's played out the way you expected, and it was good.
The Tag Team Championship, the Hurt Syndicate defending against the Outrunners. On Collision, the Outrunners beat the Premier Athletes in 9 minutes. Random match without reason. Not even a dominant victory for the number one contenders. MVP earlier called the Faces fun and entertaining, contrasting that with his group, which wants to hurt people. We get that. Then MVP had a really good line saying people like the Outrunners because they empathize with underdogs, whereas they have never been underdogs in their entire lives. It was a pretty smart contrast. This was the mid-show match. Tagging was irrelevant here. Lashley entered as the illegal man, ran all the offense, and then Shelton got the finish. Like prior matches, they have to work out stuff early. The underdog team gets like a little run, and then Syndicate just dominates in the finish. It was the right booking. It did not make for an entertaining match. It was the worst of the entire show, and it should not have been on whatsoever. 2.5 stars and a C. You know what? I'm being generous. 2.25 stars and a C.
I don't know if I'd say it shouldn't be on because the Outrunners are really popular right now. They're really over. I love them. They did that bit with Omaha basketball a week or two ago, like the hyping them up when they were kind of in town promoting the show, and it went viral, and it was like their gimmick is so fun. And I ended up going on YouTube and like looking for all their promos that I could find. The idea that they call themselves the youngest men alive is funny. Like everything about it is classic. And so you want to put them on your big show.
Can I ask you a question?
More people
before you finish. Would you put Gunther against R-Truth for the Intercontinental title on a WWE PLE?
Depends what else is on the show.
No, it doesn't.
What Gunther Intercontinental
title? Yeah. Let's make believe Gunther was the Intercontinental champion still in WWE.
No, but like
would you put a match with R-Truth on a PLE?
It's not R-Truth. It's like Pretty Deadly. It's like Pretty Deadly.
No, it's R-Truth.
Who have a funny gimmick, and guess what? They're the number one contender.
No, Pretty Deadly can actually wrestle. Right These guys can't really wrestle. I mean, R-Truth can wrestle too, but he's older. These guys are slow and plodding. They don't make for entertaining wrestling. It's a gimmick.
Yeah, but wrestling is not like that's not the bit. But I find them. You don't need to give them a 20-minute match, and that's not what they're getting. But they're funny. They're over, and you feed them to your big guys on your show. That's fine. You want to talk about the state of AEW's tag team division shouldn't be at this point. Totally with you.
Well, yeah, I've had that conversation.
But that's not really their fault. It's not like there's like some other amazing tag teams going on right now that clearly.
Oh no, they didn't take anyone's spot. No, yeah,
yeah. Fine. So in terms of their intro that AEW gives them with kind of the make it look like a tape with the static lines and stuff like that, it's a really good idea, kind of like the Timeless Tony thing.
Mm-hmm.
But you need to lower the frame rate and the sharpness.
You do.
It just
Correct.
looks like very good camera shot with a filter over it. Try to make it look really retro. It would help. I think it would help a lot. But this was not a great match, but it was what we expected it to be.
Did you watch any of the pre-show matches?
I watched. I actually fell asleep trying to watch it, but I did wake up in time for the AJ Big Boom.
All right, so let's talk about that one. Then I'll run through the other three myself. We had Big Boom, AJ, Orange Cassidy, and Mark Briscoe against Johnny TV and MXM Collection. Again, pre-show. One of 4 on the pre-show. 3 of them were all announced late in the week after we did our Ultimate Preview. The kid that's not AJ's son came out dressed like a mini Orange. Johnny and Taya. The Rizzler.
He has a name.
Okay, I guess so. Johnny and Taya Valkyrie made out ringside like tongues fully exposed and shit. They did it again while Johnny was literally in the ring wrestling. Harley Cameron pulled Taya off the apron. AJ hit a powerbomb. The son then powerbombed Mansoor off the ropes and hugged his dad. Mason Madden then took a shield powerbomb, and that was the finish of the match. Murder Machines came out after, but they didn't attack. Powerhouse Hobbs answered in a Shaq Lakers jersey. Then 2 guys from Righteous Gemstones. Great show, by the way. Adam, I forget his name. It's not Driver, whatever.
Levine.
Adam Levine.
Levine or Levine.
Adam Levine, yeah. And then the guy who plays his, let's say, partner on the show. They came in and did a double choke slam on Mansoor. there should have been more of Harley and less of almost everyone else here. It was fine. I mean,
it was fun. It's exactly what you want out of a pre-show. You know,
it's fine for a
pre-show. This is where you do some of your promotional stuff, not right after a bloody match,
right?
And you bring in the celebrities. It was a bunch of comedy spots, comedy gimmicks, and it was fun.
It was just like one thing after another. It's like the match is happening, Harley comes out. Then they finish the match and the Murder Machines come out. Then Powerhouse Hobbs comes out. Then the Righteous Gemstones. It's like, by the time it finished, there was like 20 people around the ring. It was pretty crazy.
It was a lot. I need to watch Righteous Gemstones.
Yeah, I'm watching tonight.
I don't know if I can fit in after we record. I'm pretty tired.
I think I can get White Lotus and Righteous Gemstones before I go to sleep. I'm going to do my best to achieve that.
And you're an hour ahead of me.
I am. Right. I'm an hour ahead of you, and we lost an hour last. I don't know that I'm going to accomplish it. I'm just saying I think I can. All right, 3 other matches on this pre-show really fast. ROH title, Chris Jericho against Gravity. This was literally built with some type of attack on Ring of Honor and then a 15-second taped promo on Collision. It came out of nowhere. I took a shower thinking like I could get back before the next match. I missed this segment entirely, but best I could tell looking on Twitter, the match never happened. Jericho unmasked Gravity and his family was in attendance. Apparently they didn't unmask Bandito, who was also in the ring and was being held down, so they particularly hate Gravity's mask. I don't even get it, but the match never happened. We had Daniel Garcia.
I guess you could say that Jericho was defying gravity.
We had Daniel Garcia and Undisputed Not Kingdom against Shane Taylor Promotions. Garcia blind tagged as Adam Cole was setting up for Panama Sunrise. He locked in a sharpshooter for the win as Undisputed Not Kingdom cleared potential breakups behind him. He did this while almost taunting Cole to his face. There was some build to this from TV. We'll discuss it on Thursday's show. It was the right finish for the match. I just could not be less interested in seeing STP involved in anything else going forward. They're straight jobbers. They never win anything. They get title matches for no reason. It's an absolute joke. And lastly, Commander and Hologram beat Lee Johnson and Blake Christian, which was a pre-show match made for no reason whatsoever. But there were a variety of really cool spots and quality execution throughout. There was a badly botched Poison Rana on the ring apron. But other than that, it was a fun opener to kind of get some energy into the crowd and get everyone psyched for the rest of the show. So I thought it was stupid to be on a pre-show because there was no reason for these 4 guys to wrestle. But at the same time, did it rouse the crowd? It did. So fair enough. So that wraps up AEW Revolution. This allows us to get into our grades. Now, just a reminder before we get to our post-show grades, we're going to go over our pre-show expectation grades. On the Ultimate Preview, the Silver King was enamored with this card. I said it was going to be a 92 out of 100, an A-. Our listeners are getting overheads before the show voted on Twitter at Getting Overcast. 33% in the A range, 20% B+ to B, 32% B- to C+, 15% C or lower. Shocked at those numbers, straight up. I mean, I don't know how your expectation for this card could be below a B+, but that averaged it out to an 87.4 out of 100. So they were at a B+ right on the bottom end. And then I texted Chris before the show to get his grade. He said a 91 out of 100 in A-. So he and I were aligned, listeners, below both of us. As always, Chris, when we get to this grade segment, you always get the opportunity to go first. What was your final grade for AEW Revolution?
Just to be clear, what is the number that divides an A- and an A?
So a 94 would be an A, a 93 would be an A-.
Okay, because I'm right in between there. Everything on this show was enjoyable and good. Nothing was really bad. Nothing really dragged. It didn't go on forever. It's just the way the show ended that is the thing. If we got a good finish to the main event, I'd be right there at a 94.
Mm-hmm.
But because of the kind of womp finish with Mox, and people always remember how you send them home, I think I'm going to go with a 93 A-.
Before I give you my grade, let's look at what the Getting Overheads had to say. We have 10.4% A+ to A, 53.7% A- to B+, 23.9% B to B-, and 11.9% C+ or lower. There's still a half hour left on this poll. I know. There's still a half hour left on this poll, so those numbers could theoretically change. but a significant number of votes are in, and that averages out to an 87.6, an 88 out of 100, a B plus from the listeners for AEW Revolution. And frankly, that's ridiculous as far as I'm concerned. Like that is way, way too low. I actually thought the grading from our listeners was going to be like overrating the show. I thought we were going to have like an astounding number of A plus to A, which, don't get me wrong, if you thought that was an A show, I am completely on your side. There's going to be people calling it an A plus show, the best show of the year. From a work rate standpoint, very possible. From an overall excitement standpoint, there was one notable title change that we all wanted, and we also saw it coming. The main event lacked significantly, and we actually got the wrong match in the main event. And then there was some filler in the middle of the card, but it was still excellent. I mean, there's no question that this was an A-range show. I don't know.
Yeah.
An 87, what did I say? 87 point whatever? What did I say?
Yeah, 87.6. So rounding up.
So it rounds up to an 88.
That's ridiculous.
It's ridiculously low.
Especially in the context of AEW pay-per-view. It's one of the best ones they've ever done. Like normally these things go for 5 hours and every match is 20 minutes and stuff drags, and it's like Mariah Tony was fantastic.
Yes.
Ospreay Fletcher was fantastic. Swerve Ricochet
yes.
was really, really good. Omega Takeshita,
great,
fantastic. MJ Hangman,
yes,
was really good. Like,
all completely
so
agree.
Much really, really good stuff on this show.
Honestly, the only match that I thought literally had no value was the tag team match. Even the main event, which should not have main evented, which we have problems with it, and we already discussed them. It still, if you put that in like the middle of the show, it would have been fine. Like we would have forgotten about it by the time we were at the end here talking about it. So that wasn't even that objectionable to me. And the Okada match and the Mercedes match, they were like totally fine to be on this program. So a B plus here. I mean, we have graded a lot of shows B plus that were way worse than this. Like just straight up. All right. This was a great show, AEW Revolution. So listeners getting overheads, we generally prop you up. But in this case, yeah, you got this one wrong. So Vintage, you said you were at a 93 out of 100. So the top end of an A minus. As far as my grade goes, I think what's most important before I give the letter and the numerical grade is that this is the first AEW pay-per-view I have purchased, period. Since the early fall, I found other ways to watch and make sure that we're able to do this show for you. But this is the first one I straight up went and spent my $50 on because the promotion of it, the booking of it, and the card that was presented by Tony Khan told me this show is going to be well worth your money. And midway through the show, I could already tell you it was. This was the best value for $50 that AEW has provided in at least a year plus. So kudos to them. It was a fantastic show. I am exactly where you are, like on the edge of whether this was an A show or an A minus show. Primarily because the best matches on this card, I couldn't decide whether I loved them or very much liked them. So the Will Ospreay and Kyle Fletcher and the Tony Storm Mariah May. And I am not adverse, we say this all the time, to blood and gore and violence and all of that. I grew up watching ECW and WWE. They did hardcore matches all the time. WCW did as well. But there is a level to which it becomes gratuitous. And in both of those matches, it felt like they hit that. And yet, we also got Takeshita and Omega and Swerve and Ricochet and Hangman and MJF. The Mercedes match was really good. Yeah, this was a damn good show. I'm going to go on the other side of you. And I'm going to say this was a 94 out of 100, an A show. Again, if I leave an AEW pay-per-view and I don't even question spending that $50, you're definitely an A minus, and you are most likely going to be an A because far too often over the last couple of years, I've plunked down that $50 and I've come out and said, why did I bother doing that? I could have just, done this or this and watched it and been plenty happy to skip half those matches. If you told me I could only watch half the matches on this show, I'd be disappointed because many of the other half of the matches were among the best of the entire program. So
yeah,
I thought they knocked it out of the park. I don't understand where the 88% B plus is coming from our listeners, but ultimately,
this is my show, and
it's Chris's show as well. and our votes hold a little more water. I'm at a 94. You're at a 93. That means this was a damn good pay-per-view. I will say, I just refreshed the voting. The A+A did go up from like 10.4% to 12.9. So maybe they're getting to like an 89 and a B+, but it's not going to hit an A. There's no question by the time that poll closes.
My guess is it's just because of how the show ended. The main event was slow, plotting, didn't give you a winner you wanted, and the ending made you kind of roll your eyes. And they try to save it with Swerve, but that's why the main event is the main event. It's the thing that people talk about coming out of the show, and so you have WWE used to do this for a while. You have a really good show and a terrible main event.
Happened all the time.
Down everything, and it feels like that's what happened here. But that's the only reason I'm not saying A. If you give me something better, the main event, this is an A.
If you gave me a better main event, Chris, I'm probably at a 96. Like, if they flipped the order of this card and that match turned out differently, I'm borderline A+. I mean, this was an excellent show, but you make a great point.
Yes.
Like, if you look at any review of anything, right? Like, you could, even a sports game, a basketball game, a football game, whatever the case, any player, let's pick Tua Tagovailoa, who's the quarterback of my Miami Dolphins. He can be incredible for 3.5 quarters. And if he blows it at the end of the fourth, he had a bad game. And I think when it comes to voting in situations like this from listeners and fans, they remember what they saw last. And what they saw last was the second worst, in my opinion, part of the entire show.
Yep, agree.
All right, folks, that wraps up this edition of the Getting Over Wrestling podcast. It also wraps up our 5th episode of performance-enhancing audio in the last 8 days. We have been running ourselves ragged for all of you. We had our WWE Elimination Chamber instant analysis, our WWE show on Tuesday, where we talked extensively about the John Cena heel turn. On Thursday, an NXT Roadblock preview featuring an hour-long interview with the voice of NXT, Vic Joseph. Friday, of course, we did our AEW Revolution Ultimate Preview, and now your AEW Revolution Instant Analysis. I cannot wait to get back to a regular schedule this week, although I may have just jinxed us, because who the hell knows what's going to happen at NXT Roadblock on Tuesday. Fingers crossed we don't have to drop an instant analysis for that. But on the way out of this episode, allow me to remind you that the Getting Over Wrestling podcast
It's all about Defy.
So head over to Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Leave a 5-star rating on Apple. Take a little extra time. Leave a 5-star written review. If you do, we will read it live right here on the show. Speaking of that Vic Joseph interview, don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube at Getting Overcast. You can watch that interview in full. You can see clips from interviews with Becky Lynch and LA Knight and tons of other people. And you can listen to full audio episodes on YouTube at Getting Overcast. Follow us on social media at Getting Overcast on Twitter, at Getting Over on Blue Sky. You get episode drops, news analysis highlights, all of that good stuff. You can vote in pre- and post-show polls around pay-per-views like you did for AEW Revolution. And if you send in questions and comments for the show, we will read them on the air. Anything you sent over for Revolution, we may be discussing that Thursday in our second look at the show, where we will also break down, of course, NXT and AEW. But don't forget, our next show is a WWE episode this coming Tuesday. And lastly, on the way out,
I happen to love the number 5.
I hope you do as well. $5 a month, $50 for the entire year. You can become an official Getting Overhead. Visit buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. Sign up. You'll get bonus audio, the fastest 5 minutes in professional wrestling, instant reactions to every major show, exclusive news analysis every week. That is buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. Please support us right here at the Getting Over Wrestling podcast. It's late. We both have work in the morning. So for Vintage Chris Vanini, this is the Silver King Adam Silverstein signing off and leaving you with just 3 final words. Bye for now.